Hi, I'm Emma. The cream envelope contained 5 years of his lies. Let's get into it. The envelope was thin, cream-colored, and sat on the kitchen island with the audacity of a live grenade, waiting to be picked up. I had been making coffee, the rhythmic grinding of the beans the only sound in the house, when my eyes landed on the unmarked letter that wasn't for me. My hands stopped, the steam from the mug swirling in the silence. I had seen the letter before, tucked behind the mail organizer, but I had never opened it. Not because I was curious, but because I had promised myself I wouldn't snoop. But something had shifted in the air, a static charge that made the hair on my arms stand up. I picked it up. It was from a private lab, a paternity test. The name on the test subject was my son, Leo. The name on the father's line was a blank space, but the mother's name was mine, and the signature at the bottom was my husband's. I felt the floor drop out from under me, the coffee cup slipping from my fingers to shatter on the tiles, the brown liquid spreading like a warning. But this relationship didn't end in that single, shattering moment of discovery. It ended slowly, over time, a slow bleed that I had been too in love to notice until the blood was everywhere. And to understand how we got here, you need to know how it began. Sarah and I met in the quietest corner of a coffee shop in Seattle, a place where the espresso was expensive and the conversations were low. She was an architect, precise and sharp, with a laugh that sounded like wind chimes in a summer storm. I was a graphic designer, a little more chaotic, someone who collected vintage maps and told stories about places I had never been. We clicked instantly, the kind of magnetic connection that makes you feel like you've known each other for a decade when you've only met for an hour. We spent the first year in a blur of shared apartments, late-night drives, and the kind of deep conversations that make you feel like the only two people in the world. When we got engaged, the world seemed to stop turning. We bought a house with a garden that was currently just dirt and weeds, promising to build a life there together. Leo was born 2 years later, a perfect, crying miracle with my eyes and Sarah's smile. For a long time, I thought we had it all. We were the couple people looked at with envy, the ones who had figured out the code to happiness. But looking back, the cracks weren't invisible, they were just hidden behind the heavy furniture of our routine. The first sign was the way Sarah started coming home later, citing urgent client deadlines that seemed to happen only on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She was more affectionate than usual, almost compensatory, leaving notes in my pockets and bringing me little gifts she didn't need to give. It felt like a performance, a rehearsed act to make sure I didn't notice the door closing a little too hard when I wasn't looking. I told myself it was just the stress of her job, that the early years of marriage and a newborn were taking their toll, that we were just in a slump. I wanted to believe it was a slump because the alternative was a terrifying thought I couldn't name. The relationship began to deteriorate not with a bang, but with a series of small, cold withdrawals. It started with the phone. Sarah would turn her screen face down on the table, her posture tightening whenever a notification buzzed. I tried to joke about it, asked if she was seeing a new guy, but she just laughed it off, calling me paranoid. Then came the arguments, not about big things like money or the future, but about the small details. Why did she leave the toothbrush in the sink? Why did she forget to pick up the dry cleaning? I found myself walking on eggshells, terrified that if I pushed her on the late nights, she would snap. There was a specific night in November, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. I had come home early from a client meeting, expecting a warm dinner. Instead, I found the house dark. I called her, and she picked up on the third ring, her voice tinny and rushed. "I'm stuck at the office, Mark. Can you just order pizza? I'll be late." I waited for hours. She came in at 2 in the morning, smelling of a perfume I didn't recognize, a floral scent that smelled like a different kind of night. She kissed me, a quick, dry peck on the cheek, and went straight to the shower. I stood there in the living room, watching the water run, feeling a hollow ache in my chest that I couldn't explain. We talked about it the next morning, vaguely. I mentioned the smell, the late hour. She said it was a stress scent, a client gift, that I was reading too much into it. "You're just tired, Mark. We need to take a break, maybe get a therapist." We went to a couples counselor, but the sessions felt like a waste of time. The therapist focused on our communication skills, our schedules, our parenting styles, but never on the elephant in the room that was growing larger every day. I rationalized everything. I told myself she was just burned out. I told myself that every marriage has a phase where things get weird. I told myself that as long as we were together, as long as we had Leo, we could fix anything. I ignored the way she looked at her phone with a mixture of fear and longing. I ignored the way she started sleeping on the side of the bed further from the center of the mattress. I told myself I was being irrational, that my suspicion was the real problem. But deep down, the silence in the house was getting louder, and the trust one had built brick by brick was crumbling into dust. Then came the betrayal, the secret life that had been thriving right under my nose for 6 months. It wasn't a weekend fling or a drunken mistake, it was a calculated, quiet affair with a man named David, a project manager from Sarah's firm. Sarah had started spending her lunch breaks with David, then her evenings. They had met at a conference, bonded over a shared love of modern art and a mutual dissatisfaction with their lives. But the betrayal went deeper than just sex, it was a complete rewriting of reality. Sarah had been funneling money, thousands of dollars, into a joint account she kept secret, a nest egg for a new life with David. She had even started looking at houses in a different state, a state where David lived, a place where she could start over without the baggage of a husband and a child she was starting to resent for holding her back. The lie was in the details. She told me she was working late on a major project, a project that didn't exist. She told me she was stressed about the budget, a budget that was being drained by her secret transfers. The unraveling happened on a Tuesday, the same day she had promised to be home for dinner. I had decided to surprise her with a new coffee maker for her birthday, a small gesture of love. I drove to her office, which was empty at that hour, and found her car in the parking lot. I went inside, and there she was, in a small conference room, her hand on a man's arm. David. He looked at me with a mix of defiance and pity. "We need to talk," he said. But the real shock came later that night. I confronted her in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I had found the envelope. I didn't scream. I just placed the letter on the table. "What is this?" I asked. She froze. She didn't deny it. She didn't cry. She just looked at the letter, then at me, and her face went slack, the mask finally slipping. "It's not what you think," she whispered, her voice breaking. It's complicated. "It's a paternity test, Sarah," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I had never felt before. "It's a test for our son. And the results say he's not mine." The silence that followed was absolute. The air in the room seemed to vanish. "What do you mean?" I asked. "He's not yours," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "David is the father." I didn't know until the test came back. "I've been trying to tell you, but I was so afraid. I was so terrified of losing you, of losing the life we built. I thought I could fix it." The lie had been a 6-month-long performance of a life she didn't have, built on a foundation of a child that wasn't mine, a financial theft, and a secret that had destroyed our family from the inside out. The first confrontation wasn't a shouting match, it was a cold, hollow realization that the person I loved was a stranger, and the man I thought was my best friend was a fraud. After that night, the spiral began in earnest. I tried to stay calm, to be the adult in the room, to focus on Leo. But the house felt like a crime scene. Every room held a ghost of the life we had built. I spent nights pacing the floor, replaying the conversation, wondering how I had missed it all. The denial was the first wave, a desperate hope that it was a mistake, that the lab had messed up. I called the lab, and they confirmed it. 3 tests, 3 times the same result. Leo was not my son. The second wave was rage, a white-hot anger that made my hands shake and my vision blur. I wanted to throw things, to scream, to break something, but I was terrified of what I would do. I told my mother first, and she was the first to take my side, but then she started asking the hard questions. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, her voice sharp. "I was afraid," I said. "Of what?" Of being alone. Of losing my son. But he's not yours, Mark, she said, her voice soft but cutting. And she lied to you for 6 months. The third wave was the bargaining. I tried to talk to Sarah, to find a way through it. We can fix this, I said. We can start over. Just tell me the truth, and we'll figure it out. She cried, she begged, she promised to cut David off, to pay back the money, to do anything. I love you, she said. I love you so much. But the love was tainted, poisoned by the lie. The fourth wave was the realization that we were not going to fix this. The mutual friends, the ones we had known for years, started to drift away. Some took Sarah's side, saying she was stressed, that she made a mistake. Others took my side, saying I was a fool, that I should have seen it. There was one friend, a mutual acquaintance named James, who took Sarah's side with a fervor that shocked me. You're overreacting, he told me over coffee. She's going through a crisis. Don't be the villain in her story. The loneliest moment came a week later. I was sitting in the park with Leo, watching him play on the swings. He was laughing, running, a perfect little boy. I looked at his face, the same face I thought I had raised, the same face I had loved for 2 years. And I realized that the bond one thought was unbreakable was a lie. I realized that the man I thought I was, the father I thought I was a stranger to the child I was holding. That was the moment I knew it was truly over. The love was gone, replaced by a hollow ache and a burning need for justice. I decided to walk away, to let her go, to let her face the consequences of what she had done. But before I could leave, before I could make the final call, the spiral continued. The denial, the bargaining, the rage, the realization. It was a cycle that would take months to break, a cycle of pain that would define the rest of my life. The story of this betrayal has 2 sides, 2 versions of the truth that collide and shatter. From my perspective, Sarah was a woman who had lost her way, who had let her desire for a new life consume her sense of morality. I saw her as a betrayer, someone who had taken a child who was not mine, who had stolen my time, my love, and my future. I felt like a fool, a man who had been played. But Sarah's perspective was different. She told me she had felt trapped, suffocated by the routine of marriage, by the responsibilities of motherhood. She said she had fallen in love with David, that he made her feel seen, that he made her feel alive. She told me she had hoped to leave me, to start over, to have a child with David, to build a new life. She said she hadn't planned to lie forever, but the fear of losing the life she had built kept her silent. She told me she loved Leo, that he was her son in her heart, even if he wasn't biologically mine. She said she had made a mistake, a terrible, unforgivable mistake, but she didn't regret loving David. She felt like a victim of her own desires, a woman who had been trapped in a life she didn't want. From my perspective, she was a liar, a woman who had destroyed a family. From her perspective, she was a woman trying to find happiness in a life that felt like a prison. Both of us were right, and both of us were wrong. I had missed the signs, ignored the warnings, and let the relationship drift. I had failed to be the partner she needed, even if that didn't justify her actions. She had justified her actions by telling herself that I was the problem, that I was the reason she had sought out David. She told herself that she was doing what she had to do to survive. But neither of us was entirely blameless. I had let the relationship drift, I had been blind to the warning signs, and I had failed to communicate my needs. She had chosen to lie, to steal, to build a life on a foundation of falsehoods. We were both trapped in a cycle of pain, a cycle of lies and hurt that we had created together. So, where does the guilt lie? Is Sarah purely guilty, a villain who destroyed a family for a fling? Or is the situation more complicated than it appears? Was she a victim of a boring marriage, a woman who made a terrible choice to escape? And what about me? Was I entirely blameless, a perfect husband who was just the victim of circumstance? Or did I miss the signs, did I ignore the cracks in the foundation, did I fail to see the woman I was marrying? The truth is, guilt is not a binary thing. It is a spectrum, a gray area where human nature lives. Sarah is guilty of the betrayal, of the lie, of the deception. But she is also a woman who felt trapped, a woman who made a mistake that cost her everything. I am guilty of ignoring the signs, of letting the relationship drift, of failing to be the partner she needed. But I am also a man who was blindsided, a man who loved a woman who turned out to be a stranger. The verdict isn't about who is better or worse, it's about the cost of the betrayal. The cost was my son, my trust, my sense of self. The cost was her marriage, her reputation, her future. The cost was a family destroyed. So, guilty or not? Love, lies, and hard choices. You decide. I want to know what you think. Is Sarah guilty, or is she a victim of a situation she couldn't escape? Have you ever been in a similar situation, where you found out something that changed everything? Did you forgive? Did you walk away? I want to hear your stories, your thoughts, your verdicts. This channel is about the messy, complicated, beautiful, and painful reality of relationships. If you've been through this, or if you're just curious about what happens when trust is broken, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, stories that dig deep into the heart of human connection and betrayal, please subscribe to the channel. We have a new story coming up next week, a story about a woman who found out her partner was living a double life, and the shocking revelation that followed. Don't miss it. And remember, in the world of relationships, the truth is rarely simple, but it is always worth fighting for. Thank you for listening.